This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch or get 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, then please consider becoming a patron and joining us at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Hello, Richard.
Hello.
Hello, you, the audience. How
that was
are
a very slow and mild intro for this episode of the podcast. I was expecting fasten your seatbelts, put the pedal to the metal, something like that.
Something a bit more quicker and angrier.
Yeah. But
well,
no.
I will be getting angry on this podcast, so don't you worry. This is, of course, the Cult Popture podcast, and this is film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast, where every fortnight, Richard and I consume a film franchise. And then we get together to talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we have no feelings on.
And what we love, which is each other.
Each other, yeah, exactly. because we're family.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
and this is we're just doing one last podcast and then we're retiring.
Yeah. And this is like the 4th one, and then there's going to be 9.
No, yeah, then we continue to do this podcast for another 4 years.
Yeah. So yeah, film franchise Fortnights, Fast and Furious.
Ah, what a segue.
The film and the franchise Fortnights.
Got him.
Fast and Furious film franchise Fortnights. Today we are talking about the Fast and Furious franchise, alternatively known as the Fast and Furious franchise, or the Fast franchise, or the Furious franchise.
I've never heard it called the Furious franchise.
Well, maybe, yeah. I made that up. This has been a long time coming for our podcast, Richard. I think this is probably one of the most well-known and most interesting movie franchises currently out there.
Yeah.
And it is ranked as the 10th highest grossing film series of all time.
Ooh.
So definitely one that we need to be talking about as the emperors of talking about franchises. Because I'd never seen any of these films before this.
Wow. I had seen, I saw the 4th one in cinemas, and then I remember watching the first one being on at a party, and I remember thinking that, like, the one scene I remembered from the first one is actually in the 4th one.
There you go. Because for me, it got to the point where by the time people was telling me they were actually really good, I hadn't seen any of the previous ones. Then I was like, well, I'm not going to go to them. And then when the 8th one came out, we were doing this podcast, and I was like, well, I'll do it one day.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, because you didn't want to for ages, I remember.
Or I don't know. I feel I'm on record saying I prefer doing the more obscure franchises and not the 10th highest grossing franchise of all time. But look, never on the show have we covered a series of this length, which is as diverse as it is. The series has accumulated a mass of A-list actors. It has sequels, prequels, midquels, and spin-offs. It has a couple pieces of dark behind-the-scenes trivia, and it spans multiple eras, genres, critical receptions, and titling schemes. In short, this is, in terms of structure and production, the franchise this podcast was made for. Yeah. Like, this has it all. You know, this is everything that we dissect when we dissect the frog that is the franchise. Frog franchise Fortnights. And since we have 9 films to cover this episode, we're going to be covering each of them one at a time. But just to give you what they're called up top, Richard, without looking, can you tell me the names of each of the films of the series?
Yes, I certainly can. So you've got 2001's The Fast and the Furious. Then you've got 2003's Too Fast, Too Furious. Then 2006 brought us The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. And then 2009 we had Fast and Furious, the fastest and most furious title up to that point. And then 2011 we had Fast 5, even more fast. And then Fast and Furious 6 in, I believe, 2013. And then Fast... Furious 7. I forgot what one I was up to. Furious 7 came out in 2015.
Yes.
And then you have Fate of the Furious 2017, sorry. And then Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw, or just Hobbs and Shaw in 2019, a week ago.
Yep.
That was
Very
all
good.
without looking as well, so that's
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the weirdest thing I've memorized, I think.
yeah.
Was the titles of a 9 film long series I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first film was The Fast and the Furious in 2001. This was directed by Rob Cohen, and it has a Rotten Tomatoes score. Do you know what that Rotten Tomatoes score is?
I believe that the first 4 are rotten and the other 5 are all fresh. So
Yes.
going off that, I think it's like 54.
53.
Nice.
It says I'm 54, but I'm only 53.
53.
Very nice. Little Hot Fuzz reference and a podcast about something very different.
Thus confirming that the Cornetto trilogy will be our next film franchise, as often happens when we mention another franchise up top.
We get it randomly decided because that is the fate of the franchise podcast. All right, what is The Fast and the Furious about?
So, The Fast and the Furious is about LAPD officer Brian O'Connor, played by Paul Walker, who goes undercover to investigate an illegal street racing gang suspected of stealing valuable electronics. There he meets and befriends Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, and eventually Brian lets... again, in a Hot Fuzz reference, because it's very similar to the ending of Point Break, because it's essentially a remake of Point Break, that Brian lets him get away because he loves him so much, and then he's, disgraced from the Force, but we get into that more in the sequel.
Yeah. It has a Casablancan ending of Brian letting Dom ride off into the sunset instead of arresting him.
Yeah. Firing his gun up in the air and going,
Yeah. So I didn't think this movie was very good. What did you think?
I mean, it's about 54%. It's very 2001. It's like, again, it's fun as like a remake of Point Break with like a new skin, a very 2001 skin on it, where it's, like Paul Walker's haircut in this one compared to like 4 and 5 onwards. He's got like the sort of almost Justin Timberlake-y long blonde hair. Well, not long, but like, shaggy blonde hair. And it's just it's similar to Mission Impossible 2 and its kind of visual style as well. That very in your face, slick kind of,
Yeah.
But as to what I thought of it, it's a bit of fun, but it definitely is on the lower half of the franchise.
It's strange, isn't it? Because people say to you, like there's a section of the Fast and Furious fan base which prefer the street racing films to the later films, and it's like, this isn't a very good movie by any.
I've read a couple of like ranking all of them, including Hobbs and Shaw, and a lot of them have this in like the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, which is. It's so wrong.
Yeah.
Stop being stupid. And I thought the characters were pretty flimsy. I thought the story wasn't very interesting. And it's also representing, and we'll get to this, well, this will probably come up a lot in the first half of this franchise. It's representing a section of society which not only do I not identify with, but I don't really respect either.
Right, okay.
I don't think street races are cool. I think they're dangerous, and I don't care.
They should wear a helmet.
They should wear their seatbelts. And I mean, and you get a lot more in the earlier movies than the later movies, though it does show up in the later movies. There is some pretty. What am I trying to say?
Yeah, I'm wondering that myself.
The sexualization and objectification of the woman in these earlier films can be
not even just in the earlier films, dude. Like, there's a lot of butt shots throughout the whole franchise.
And it's very male gazy, which is to be expected from a franchise which is probably the poster child of the male gaze as a concept. I also, one of the things you didn't mention in the synopsis, but we can talk about now, Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, his sister's name is Mia, and Brian and Mia eventually in the rest of in the later movies they get together, they get together in this one as well. But I didn't understand watching this film if Brian was either being very morally ambiguous and seducing her and playing with her heart to get more information, or if he's being really unprofessional as an undercover cop and actually like actively pursuing a relationship with her.
Well, I think based on his behavior throughout the rest of the franchise, he is being a bad cop, because he does a lot of bad cop things in these movies.
Yeah, there's no scene where he's talking to his like superiors and he's like, falling in love wasn't part of the plan, Like I think it needed
it needed that scene.
It needed specifically that line of dialogue.
Yeah, I mean it has all the other fucking cliche ones.
It just wasn't clear, and it stops you from fully getting on board with the character because you don't find out he's a cop until maybe a quarter of the way through, which is probably one of the more interesting things this film does. And so yeah, I wasn't too sure on that. Would you say you were invested in the family by this point? At this stage?
No, like I definitely like watching these films. This is something I guess I kind of didn't really expect, but I probably should have expected. Is that like Paul Walker's definitely like the heart of this franchise, and Brian O'Connor, and because the first movie is like he's the main character of the first movie, I would say.
First two, yeah.
First two, yeah. But yeah, like the first one, especially where you think of it as just like a Vin Diesel vehicle, but it's Paul Walker's story. And yeah, he's definitely like the heart of the franchise. And I was kind of surprised how quickly you just like him more than all the other characters.
Sure, yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because obviously knowing what was coming as well, I was like, oh, I wonder how like emotionally affected I'm actually going to be by this.
Yeah. So, despite this being kind of like one of the go-to films you'd say when talking about like a turn your brain off movie, and I was texting you while I was watching it, and we both were like agreed that we were like getting pretty lost in some of it, and I think it's more out of like being bored by the movie and then missing like crucial elements.
Yeah, I think it's more like it's like bad storytelling as well.
Yeah,
like there's some parts where you're like, well, wait, who's this guy? Why is he coming to it? Yeah.
I was genuinely shocked when the credits started rolling because I thought we were like about to go face the big bad.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that the people that just chased died and that they were the bad guys. And then it ends, he's like, all right, I'm letting you go. And then the credits roll, and I was like, didn't they have someone else to chase? Where was the big boss fight? But also, the film kind of leads you down the garden path and thinking that Dom is innocent of stealing all the DVD players, which is what this film's about. But it was him, right? It was him. He gets away with it, and yeah. But it's strange, isn't it? Because it's set up in a like plot structure way of being like, despite what you think, it's actually Dom's actually innocent, but it's actually like, nah, he's a criminal. Yep.
Yeah, but he's cool.
He's cool. He's so nice to his friends and his family.
Well, his friends are his family, dude.
What's the difference? You feel me?
He doesn't have friends. He's got family.
Okay. Well, that's about all I've written for the first film. Did you have anything you wanted to say? On that?
No.
Well, yeah, it's for the start of the franchise. It's one of the more unassuming films in the series to talk about.
Yeah.
So in 2003, we got Too Fast, Too Furious, directed by John Singleton. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
40.
It's 36.
Nice.
And what is this movie about?
So, after letting Dom get away at the end of the previous film, Brian is now street racing to make ends meet.
It's a bold move, eh? You're like a disgraced cop, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go and do the thing I was disgraced for, just in broad daylight, using my real name.
Yeah. So he gets caught by the cops, but he makes a plea deal kind of thing to take down a Miami drug lord. Along with his childhood friend Roman Pierce in exchange for his freedom. And then so they team up together and take down a Miami drug lord.
Yeah. This film sees the introduction of Tyrese Gibson as Roman Pierce, as you said, and as well as Ludacris's Tej.
Yeah.
Who become staples of the franchise later on. They were actually only introduced because Vin Diesel was busy filming The Chronicles of Riddick, So this is the only sequel until Hobbs and Shaw to not feature Vin Diesel, and frankly, I think that's a good thing because I hate Vin Diesel. And watching these, I didn't hate Vin Diesel properly until I watched these movies, and I was like, this will be a recurring theme throughout this podcast, is me slowly revealing how much I dislike Vin Diesel. But it wasn't just because he was filming The Chronicles of Riddick. He didn't like the script either. And he said that they didn't take a Francis Ford Coppola approach to it. Yeah, no shit, Vin Diesel. They didn't take a Francis Ford Coppola approach
and they
to
did
the
with
sequel.
the first one.
They approached it like they did the sequels of the 80s and 90s, when they would drum up a new story, unrelated for the most part, and slap the same name on it. Oh, what a tragedy.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
Thank
However,
God
Diesel
he
has,
brought back the integrity to this franchise.
Vin Diesel reflected on this decision in July 2014 in a report from Uproxx, saying, I would have said, don't walk... This is what I think what he's saying, what he would have said to himself if he could go back to 2003. I would have said, don't walk away from it just because the script sucked and Too Fast, Too Furious, because there's an obligation to the audience to fight, no matter what, to make the film as good as possible. I might have had a little bit more patience or belief in the long term of it. Oh, you're such a hero, Vin Diesel.
Oh my gosh, Vin Diesel is so dreamy. So, okay, what did I think of this film? I prefer this one to the second one. I know this to the first one, sorry. I know that this is a classic bad sequel. Like, this is one of those ones I've heard is like, despite the title being such a meme and people think it's such a cool title, it's considered, very poor, and the Rotten Tomatoes score reflects that. But I thought it was fun. I sort of enjoyed the Paul Walker Tyrese Gibson chemistry more than the Paul Walker Vin Diesel chemistry, at least in the first one anyway. Just and because
they actually feel like they're friends and family.
Yeah, and as well that Roman Pierce is throughout the whole series is the comic relief. So you just have a bit more fun with him than Dom Toretto, who's trying so hard to be the alpha in every scene. And
no, so Vin Diesel is trying to be the alpha. So, Dom Toretto is the alpha in the universe of
because of all the work Vin has done behind the scenes to ensure it's like that. So I would say, I actually found this one more fun.
It is more fun, and I think that's why people think it's worse, is because it's a precursor to how silly this franchise gets in a fun way.
Yeah.
It goes a little bit more ridiculous. But I know what you mean. It does feel like a sequel, doesn't it? In ways I can't properly articulate. I feel it in my gut. Like the new characters and the plot, and like only one of the characters returning, the new love interest and the lack of impact it has on the rest of the series.
Yeah, it's not Capoleon.
No, very distinctly un-Capoleon. But even like the location of Miami and the color palette somehow.
They're
sequely.
Miami is such a like sequel location.
Yeah. In this film, we also meet Eva Mendez's Monica, who's an undercover cop, who up until writing this episode plan, I'd completely forgotten appears again at the end of Fast 5.
Yeah.
But then she never comes back. She appears at the end of Fast 5 and you're like, oh, they really are bringing all the characters back. And then until I was writing this, I was like, even Mendez wasn't in any of the other sequels after Fast 5.
You just reminded me as well, one thing I was going to talk about, but like, at least definitely the first 3 films, I'm pretty sure, have like a real intense like torture scene.
Yeah, that's the next thing. We're on the same wavelength, dude. It's because we're family.
Yeah, because so the first film has a scene where there's like a pump oil thing, and he forces oil into this guy's mouth and all over his face to essentially waterboard him with oil, and like poison him, I guess as well. And then in this scene, they do the thing of putting a rat inside a bucket upside down on someone's stomach and lighting the bottom of it so that the rat is forced to crawl away from the flame through the person's stomach.
You described it so much better than how I wrote it down, dude. It's just a mess of syntax errors and
run-on sentences.
Run-on sentences, try with the way I wrote it. I was like, how do I describe this?
How did you write it?
I wrote, there's a scene in the film where the bad guy traps a rat in a bin, which is face down on a man's stomach, and then starts heating up the bin to try and force the rat to bury its way through the man's body to escape. And then I wrote, it's metal as shit. It doesn't end up happening, which is kind of a...
Well, it does. It scratches through him.
Yeah. But my question for this scene, do you think that would have actually worked? Do you think a rat...
Yeah, it's like an old form of torture.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I was watching it and I had my arms crossed and I was like, I don't know if this would actually happen.
Yeah, but because, I mean, like, the rat is in danger, it's forced to crawl away from the danger. And, I mean, like, rats are fucking strong. They can, like, chew through concrete and shit. So, your body and organs ain't got shit on concrete. I'm sorry, AJ, but they don't.
How quick are rats?
They're pretty fast, actually.
Yeah, what do you think their temperament is?
Like, in my experience at least, they've been pretty furious.
And in some cases, they've been too fast and too furious.
Yeah.
So this is considered... it's not, but I thought it was. I thought this was considered the worst film of the franchise by critics. It's actually not. But apparently some critics now consider it underrated. So isn't that nice?
That is nice. Yeah, well, I think it's like you said, it's the ridiculousness of the franchise that comes in later on that now it's like it was a hero. We just couldn't see it at the time. Yeah, because it's... Yeah, the first one takes itself a little bit too seriously, whereas I don't think this one does.
You know why it takes itself seriously and this one doesn't?
Why?
Guess who wasn't involved? I
wonder.
What very serious producer
this one wasn't
involved?
directed by Francis Ford Coppola.
Vin Diesel is the Francis Ford Coppola of our time. Any more thoughts
Francis Ford Coppola's still alive.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he? I thought he was dead. No, it's
Stanley Kubrick's dead.
No, Marlon Brando. I was thinking of.
Okay.
Well, because he worked with Francis Ford Coppola a bunch of times.
All right.
I'm a film buff. I've seen The Godfather once. I've watched a bit of Apocalypse Now. Okay, I've seen Too Fast, Too Furious. The
three Coppola
trilogy.
films that everyone studies in film school.
Any more thoughts on Too Fast, Too Furious, or shall we drift over?
Drift over to the next one.
The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift from 2006, the first film in the franchise directed by Justin Lin.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
So we had 53 and then
36.
36, so I'm going to say 44.
38. This is 2 points above Too Fast and Furious. And what is this movie about?
So this is when teenager, in quotation marks, Sean gets in one little street race and his mum got scared and said, "You're moving with your father in Tokyo." And so, yeah, he gets into a race with Brad from Home Improvement.
Yeah.
And, yeah, is forced to move to Tokyo to straighten out, but he immediately gets into drift racing. He befriends a guy called Han, who ends up dying in a fiery crash, which we'll revisit later on.
Okay,
and then he takes on the Drift King and, yeah.
I forgot about the Drift King.
Yeah, DK.
Yeah.
What does DK say for Donkey Kong?
Put a pin in that. What did you think of this film?
So this is one that I'd heard people say, like obviously everyone knows after Fast 5 they actually get quite good or like quite fun, but then people go, actually the third one's real good, or like the third one's still one of the best. And then watching it I was like, how the fuck does anyone like this movie? Like what the hell? Like, but then finishing the movie and having some time to like sit with it in the week, and now having seen all of them as well, I do kind of get what they mean. It probably is my favorite of the first three, which is, and it's even more a testament to how good in quotation marks the film is, that I rank it like that, because it has the worst main character in any film I've ever seen.
Yep.
Like worst performance, just like a horrible. Oh my god! Like maybe not the worst main character, but one of the worst lead performances I've ever seen. But then like Han is a really cool character, and it's a bummer to see him die. But then we'll get into what happens there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess the drifting, the change of scenery is also quite fun as well. That it's like, it just feels, it did shake it up a bit, which I guess is
It's
what
a
they were trying to do.
distinct threequel, right? Because
Yeah.
now we're in a different country. We're not just in Miami
Yeah.
now. Sean is probably the worst character in the entire series, like the worst main character.
Yeah, and by series, you mean any film ever made.
Yeah, in the history of film. Because we're introduced to him as this calm and collected racer, and then he races against Brad from Home Improvement for the prize of having ownership over Brad's girlfriend.
Oh my god, can we talk about because this was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, so Brad and Sean, I can't remember Brad's name.
It's just Brad. Dude.
Yeah, Brad and Sean get into this fight, and he's like,
"I'll race you for your girlfriend," and Brad's like,
and then Sean's like, yeah, so they're like, oh, what are we going to race? Because Sean's got a real shitty car and Brad's got a real nice car. And they're like, oh, I'll trade you, like, get for the pink slips or the keys. And then Brad's girlfriend's just like, I know, winner gets me. And then Brad's like, oh. But it's so like, make Brad beat his girlfriend. Like, you just feel sorry for him. Like, oh, your girlfriend's such a fucking bitch. Like, holy shit. She's just like willing to walk away with this like dumb-faced fucking hick who like, oh my God. Like, actually, he's Forrest Gump, this character. And then, but she's like, yeah, sweet. I'm in this happy relationship, presumably with Brad. Like, they don't really set up that she's unhappy particularly.
Do you think after the race, Brad and the girl, like, they go away and he's like, I want you to know you're really playing on my insecurities by betting yourself.
Yeah, just be like, hey, just so you know, like, that actually really hurt my feelings. But then she went away with Sean anyway, didn't she?
No. Sean like smiles at her, but his mouth is full of blood and she freaks out.
Oh yeah. But yeah, like you can fix this by just having Brad put her up to bet.
Yeah.
And then she's unwilling, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But you have a girl, a female character in your film making herself an object, a prize. Yes. And we're supposed to be like, oh, what a twist. What a fun little thing
it's
there. I hope Sean gets to have sex with this object when he wins her.
And so the two of them, they've raced through like a construction site. And there's one part where Sean cuts a corner to get in front. And it's treated like a smart move, even though like that's cheating.
I don't know, it's not cheating in Crash Team Racing.
Well, okay, sure, but there is like a clear track, and Sean like drives through a building to beat him. But then when he gets back out into the main track, he's not even in the lead. So it's not even a shortcut. It just takes him just as long.
Because he had to crash through the building, like which slowed him down.
So this is our second franchise in which the third film was intended to be a standalone anthology movie, but then every sequel after it returned to the original storyline after Halloween. Did that? Season of the Witch. And I think both this film and Too Fast, Too Furious are definitely the most like inconsequential films in the series. Their only real purpose overall is to introduce new characters to the family, you know. They don't like have plot carryover. They don't have, you know, anything like that. It's just characters that you see for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think while watching this film, I felt like I'd started to feel like Fast and Furious is a straight to DVD franchise in the body of a theatrical release franchise.
Yeah, I get you.
Like this franchise is Bring It On for lads. Like
bring it on, lads.
There are high school sweethearts all across the world, I bet, where the girlfriend's favorite franchise is Bring It On, and the guy's favorite franchise is Fast and Furious.
Yeah, and I just like would not want to hang out with that couple.
No, neither would they. Wouldn't want to hang out with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I before you said that you felt this was the best one of the first three, and I think it's either the best of the first three or the worst because of Sean's accent. So yeah. I fluctuate. I can't decide. But I pulled up some reviews here for it from the time. So Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle said, the main character has no plan and no direction, just a blind desire to smash up automobiles and steal a mobster's girlfriend, which is different to Brad's girlfriend.
Yeah.
As for the racing scenes, who cares about this made me laugh. As for the racing scenes, who cares about the finesse move of drifting compared to going fast? Who cares about drifting?
One really funny thing in this film as well is that when he's like, drifting, what's that? And like that's not exaggerated as well. That's what it sounds like. And Han explains how drifting was invented, like because drivers would like come up to the mountains of Japan and like practice their drifting, and it's like the stupidest fucking like
way to make it like a mystical.
But that's true.
Is it
That's
really?
actually how drifting was invented. Like,
well, that's good then. That's a good
that's
way to
like a
utilize
cool
it for the series. Yeah. The review goes on to say, and who wants to watch guys racing in a parking lot? For that matter, who wants to watch guys race down a mountain with lots of turns? And Rob Cohen, who directed The Fast and the Furious, was very critical of this film, saying, if you were to just watch Tokyo Drift, you'd say, I never want to see anything related to Fast and Furious again.
Okay.
Yeah. So Han is introduced in this film. You quite liked Han. Did you want to do a little monologue about how much you like Han?
I didn't realize I was supposed to like him that much. No, I just thought he was a cool character. Like, especially when your main character is so horrible. That you gravitate towards the kind of the cool expert. He's always snacking. He's the especially in Fast 5, he's the Brad Pitt from Ocean's 11, the cool one that's always snacking. Yeah.
Man, I'm just keep thinking about Sean's accent, and I'm like, there's no way this is the best of the first three.
Yeah,
it is such a blemish on this already average film, that main character.
Yeah.
So Vin Diesel agreed to make a cameo at the end of this film in exchange for Universal's ownership to the rights of the Riddick series and character, a property which he's done like one thing with since 2003.
Yeah. Although it's just recently announced, though, isn't it, that they're making another one?
Probably. Yay.
So
he took that instead of getting paid for it.
Oh, really? Interesting.
He cares about the series, dude. But isn't it interesting how much more Diesel would end up investing in the Fast and Furious franchise, which was a franchise he was trying to get away from, and B, like he only appeared in it to get the rights back for this other dead franchise that he hasn't done anything with.
Yeah.
And now it's like Fast and Furious is his thing.
He's strange. It's called the Chronicles of Riddick Furia. Fast and Furious.
All right, so in 2009, Richard, severed from the ties of Tokyo Drift, but not really because it's the same director and same characters return. We had Fast and Furious, which was directed by Justin Lin. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
This is the lowest one. It's like 29.
29. I don't know if I agree.
Fuck off. This is so bad. This one's the worst one.
There are echoes of what's to come in the series, though.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that, but this is the worst one, 100%.
All right, well, what's
without
a
doubt in my mind, this is the worst one. So, Dom's crew has disbanded since we last saw them in the first film, really. But then he's brought back in for one last ride after his wife, their married wife or partner.
Well, you don't know they're married yet. But they did get
Letty,
married.
Michelle Rodriguez, is seemingly killed. Note I said seemingly. That'll come up later on. And he ends up back in contact with Brian O'Connor, who's now an FBI agent for some reason.
Because that's your career trajectory. You like betray the police twice, and then you get upgraded to FBI.
And then they work together to take down a drug lord. This film's so bad, man. This is the worst one. Like, but
it's just made so much better.
But
I don't know.
What you were saying about how there's shades of it. Like, this film walked so that Fast 5 can run.
Yeah, sure.
Like this film is so bad, but it's the necessary. You couldn't just like Fast 5 couldn't be the one after Tokyo Drift. You know,
right?
Like, whereas you need Fast and Furious that still has the street racing elements, but hints that they want to try and do something bigger with this franchise.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I wrote it's the awkward, forgettable middle child.
Yeah.
It's the connective tissue between the last two films for the first the previous films and the future of the series. And so this film and the next two, so Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6, are chronologically set before Tokyo Drift.
Yeah.
Which before I saw these movies properly and just had heard about them, I had presumed was just a cheap, easy way to reincorporate Han back into the series, even though he died. But then he's barely in this one, except for in a couple of scenes.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, do you have written down somewhere the reason why they did it?
No.
Oh, because it was to bring back Han. It was. I was reading an interview with the screenwriter because the same guy's written like most of them and talking about Hobbs and Shaw, and he was talking about how because they're like, oh, you know, we're going to get more about Han in the future, and he's like, look, we all love Han and the actor Sung Kang, I think his name is, and it's like, and he said like we changed the timeline of the films just to do three more with them. So yeah, that is why. Okay. But can anyone out there, if you're listening to this and you're a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise, because this is something that not sure if I had misinformation or I still just don't quite understand. I always thought that it was a twist at the end of 6 that it's a prequel, because I'd heard people say it's revealed in 6 that it's all a prequel to the third one. But then like the first character you see in this film is Han, who just died in the last film. So when Fast and Furious came out, if you're a fan of the franchise, when the fourth one came out, did you was the general consensus the assumption that Han survived the crash, or did we know going into these 3 that they were prequels?
No, I think the twist at the end of 6 was that Jason Statham.
But
that's what I'd heard. That was how it was pitched to me. Was like, have you heard about the twist at the end of Fast and Furious 6? And I was like, when am I ever going to watch that movie? What is it? And they were like, Jason Statham's in it.
My Brent Taylors and my other boys out there.
My Tim Artabors.
Tim Artabor, yeah, he's a good one. Yeah, if you guys were into I just want to know what the general consensus going into Fast and Furious was. What you thought it was.
They had announced that it was a prequel, though. So, but you're more saying, did people know that?
Yeah, like was this just like people went into this one knowing it was a prequel or not?
Right.
Or was it a huge surprise that
the end of Tokyo Drift? Vin Diesel's like, I rode with Han. He was one of my pals. Blah. So I don't know. I think, interesting.
Because it doesn't communicate in any way that it's a prequel until the 6th one.
Yeah, sure. Speaking of Vin Diesel, I feel like this is the first film that really cemented my one-way feud. Because it's clear he has a very inflated view of himself, because he is a producer on the film, so he definitely has creative control, and these films don't get made without Vin Diesel's credit on them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they do because Hobbs and Shaw, but this kind of thing comes into play later in the series with the various feuds with his co-stars. But I think it begins here with the introduction of Gal Gadot as a possible new love interest for Dom. And he rejects her in the film because he's still continuing to mourn Letty for at least one more film. But it starts to become clear from here on out that Vin Diesel thinks he's so cool that Gal Gadot would be into him, But I don't think he's cool. I think he's lame and creepy.
Yeah.
Because you said that there's that famous video that Drew Gooden did a thing on that.
Yeah, you should actually, if you're listening to this, you should go search Drew Gooden's video, Vin Diesel, King of Cringe.
Yeah, because I'm not just being mean to an actor I don't know anything about. I've seen him in interviews, and there's that one interview where he's essentially sexually harassing his female interviewer. And it's very weird.
It's very weird.
It's what happens when you get so famous that you think you can get away with shit like that, basically. Yeah.
But it's not like it's creepy in a weird way. It's creepy in the way that he thinks he's being flirtatious and funny, but because it's Vin Diesel.
Oh my God, you're beautiful.
When this turn into I love you?
Yeah, it's like weird lines and shit.
Yeah, it's seeing someone with no game flirt.
Yeah, but he's famous, so it doesn't occur to him that he's got no game.
And he's got this weird mumbly growly voice, so it's also very strange.
Vin Diesel should play Elmer Fudd in the Looney Tunes live action movie. He would never do it, but he should.
He's too famous.
He looks like him as well. Vin Diesel is Elmer Fudd. I'm saying it.
Yeah.
In 2011, we got Fast Five, directed by Justin Lin. And, Justin Lin's directed the past two, and neither of them really landed with critics. So, it's like, oh, Justin, what are you doing? Why are you rolling this dead thing out for another film? Obviously, this one isn't going to be any better than the last two, but guess what? It has on Rotten Tomatoes, Richard.
69.
It's got 77
Nice.
on Rotten Tomatoes. Isn't that insane? Have we ever covered a franchise that has this trajectory of critical opinion before? This isn't the pattern, This isn't the first one or two are high, and then usually the third or fourth one are real bad, and franchises this long, or you'll get the occasional one where it's Mission Impossible, where the second one drops, but the other ones are real great. But
usually the first one's considered one of the best.
Yeah, and in this series, it's down, up, and then down again.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the series starts here.
Yeah, 100%. This is where you would tell someone to start.
Yeah.
But so this one is about the gang.
The family.
Yeah, the family, sorry. Plans
the Fast family.
A heist to steal $100 million from a crime lord in Rio de Janeiro. And so while they're doing that, and this is very much a heist film, the new character, Luke Hobbs, portrayed by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, is hot on the heels of Brian and Dom, specifically. Yeah, and so this one completely reinvigorates the franchise. It ends with this great scene, this chase of the two cars towing a giant bank vault behind them through the streets of Brazil. This is Brazil. Presumably killing and injuring thousands of people, but it's very
okay because Rio de Janeiro the entire population is corrupt cops, so it's okay.
Yeah. So, what did you think of this film, AJ?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I understand why it's
this film's
best
awesome.
one so far.
Because you're famously not intelligent enough to watch heist films. How did you follow this one?
Honestly, the heist stuff lost me for a little bit. But I got back on board.
Because this has the classic heist thing as well, which I know that you're not a fan of oh, no, it didn't work. But wait a minute, here's one thing we didn't show you.
Yeah. Don't do that with you want to see your main characters all the way through. You don't want to... That's something you save for a villain reveal, not a hero.
I so disagree. It's such a great trope of heist films that, the main character has one more thing up their sleeve. And I guess if you don't like that trope, you're just never going to like a heist film because they all do.
Well, I mean, I liked this movie. It's good.
Yeah, this film was great, man. I thought, there's an argument that this is the best movie of this kind in the last 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. So this film makes Fast and Furious our third franchise, which has released its second, third, fourth, and fifth entries in 2003, 2005, 2009, and 2011, respectively, with the fifth being a prequel. Although whether or not you'd call Fast 5 a prequel, I guess, is up for debate because it's a sequel to Fast and Furious, which is a prequel to Tokyo Drift, but it's a midquel for the series.
Yeah. Also...
That extremely specific piece of trivia was brought to you by Richard earlier this week, texting me, and I was like, all right, I'll put that in the plan.
Yeah. And that's after X-Men and Final Destination.
Oh,
because people were being like, what? But also the fact that, so they each have the fifth one be a prequel, but it's kind of like a prequel with an asterisk because Final Destination, obviously, you don't realize it's a prequel to the end of it. This one, like you said, it's a sequel to Fast and Furious, but it's still part of a prequel trilogy to Tokyo Drift, and it's a midquel. And then also X-Men is First Class, which is is it a reboot or is it a prequel? Yeah. They're all kind of prequel asterisks.
Yeah. So this is such a strange entry to the series because it's actually good. And because it's such a departure from the other films, when people talk about when people talk about how the first one's about DVDs players getting stolen, and this one's a crazy heist film. It's like, yeah, this is the like Fast and Furious, the fourth film, dipped a toe in changing genre, and this is like we are in a different category in Video Easy now. You know?
Yeah, but it's the franchise is so much better for it.
Yeah, and it's better for it because Dwayne Johnson joins the party. Dwayne the Rock Johnson, which I call him that because I don't think he likes being called The Rock anymore. People don't talk about this. He hasn't gone by The Rock officially in years, and I don't think he wants to be called it now. But everyone always calls him Dwayne The Rock Johnson, which means that now his nickname is Dwayne The Rock Johnson, meaning he's Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
I want to get back to that, talking about Dwayne Johnson and being called The Rock. But because there's an article that just came out this week about the egos of the stars, and we're going to talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, we will.
Because we'll bring it up then. I'll put a pin on that. Yeah.
Is Dwayne Johnson, in his first scene in Fast 5 in the whole series, is he doing an accent? And then it never comes back?
Yeah, so he's he's got
that?
kind of a southern accent, eh?
It's I want to say it's like a regional specific American accent that isn't his own American accent.
Yeah.
There's a bit where he like recruits Elena, who's his partner. He's like, "Get me that girl," and they're like, "Why? She doesn't have any of the da 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 da." And he's like, "I like her smile," and he says it like that. And I was like, "This is Dwayne Johnson as I've never seen him."
Yeah, and then by the time we get to Hobbs and Shaw, he's like, "Yeah, I'm from Samoa."
But by the time we get to the end of Fast 5, the accent's gone. It's so funny. It's like they must have filmed that scene first, I guess.
Yeah.
And he's got like a real thick black goatee, and like The Rock looks the same in every movie now, and it's so interesting to see him
except for Fast 5.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like Fast 5 is like the last time he looked different in a movie to what he looks like now. Like he's not wearing his khakis. He's not completely bald and clean shaven.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this film is the first, as I said before, this film is the first departure from the series from street racing movies into blockbuster action. And from here, it's really funny to see how desperately they try to reincorporate cars and racing back into stories that don't really need to involve to any large degree. Like this one, they kind of get away with it because it's like they're coming from that background and it's like, we need street races to rob a bank. And it's like, cool, that's the story. But then the next ones, it's like, they're like, oh, fuck, the series is called Fast and Furious. We have to throw NOS in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's the Universal chairman, Adam Fogelson, has been on the record saying, the question putting Fast 5 and Fast 6 together for us was, can we take it out of being a pure car culture movie and into being a true action franchise in the spirit of those great heist films made 10 or 15 years ago? Which I think is a really interesting quote, because that's the first... And not that I've looked into it, but that's like the first kind of acknowledgement from the creative forces of this pivot into a different kind of movie.
Yeah. But like we said, is that like Fast and Furious F4 kind of bridges that gap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Last thing for Fast 5 that I want to talk about is, personally, I love how frustrated Vin Diesel would be that the first film in the franchise to actually be positively reviewed by critics is probably the one he would now regard as where the series started going downhill.
Because it has
he'd be like, "Oh, it's when Dwayne Johnson got involved. It's when Dwayne Johnson got involved, and
stop being about the family."
I reckon Vin Diesel's favorite is Fast and Furious. I reckon that's his favorite.
It would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, and also as well, that at the end of this film, it's revealed Eva Mendes returns and reveals that Letty is still alive.
Yep, and that brings us through into Fast and Furious 6 in 2013, directed by Justin Lin. Again, what does this have on Rotten Tomatoes?
70.
It's 70. So we're in, there's two fresh reviews in a row. So what's this movie about?
So having, I guess, retired, Dom and Brian are pulled back into the fold by Luke Hobbs, who recruits them to take down British terrorist Owen Shaw, played by Luke Evans. And then it's also Dom finds out that Letty is still alive, but she's got amnesia and doesn't remember him. And so he basically just forces her to love him again and until she
Well, he's
remembers
so
everything.
irresistible, Richard.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
She'd be a fool not to.
And then also a post-credit scene for this film introduces Deckard Shaw, who is Jason Statham's character, and it's him killing Han in Tokyo Drift, which closes the time loop of this franchise. So thus ending the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, it's... Yeah. I went into this movie not having forgotten that Jason Statham's not in it till the post-credit scene, and I was like, all right, rubbing my hands together like, so we're getting a Jason's... because I quite like Jason Statham.
Yeah.
And I was like, hell yeah, dude. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm stuck with Luke Evans for most of the movie.
And also, keeping in with the last one, had the safe through the streets of Rio. This one ends on like a runway. So they're like racing alongside a plane, and it goes for 20 minutes, which someone has calculated that that makes the runway 30 miles long.
That's silly.
Which for our Kiwi listeners or British or whatever, people that most everywhere except the States.
Now we're doing it.
This is that's almost 50 kilometers long, and so as you know, a runway is not that long. 50 kilometers is a pretty long way. Like you might think, there might be runways out there that are 50 k's. There aren't.
So I think this is definitely the weakest film of the like golden trilogy of 5, 6, and 7, right? But at the same time, I do think it has the best introduction or like the strongest call to adventure, I think, because if the creators of the series were a little less willing to like think of another way to bring everyone back into the fray each movie, I do think that the family just being a team hired by the government or whoever for a mission of the week is a perfectly sustainable way to keep the series moving. It worked, I guess is what I'm saying.
Just sorry to interrupt. Runways in general are 1.8 to 2.4 kilometers long, and this one's 50. Just for
maybe it was going round in circles.
Yeah, maybe.
Gal Gadot dies as well.
Yeah, which was funny because I thought it was really funny because so I just assumed that she left the franchise to go do Wonder Woman. I was like, oh, she actually dies like
in a very unceremonious and not that focused on scene.
But they kind of fridge her by just making it like, that's why Han went to Tokyo, because as the fifth film ends with Han driving away with Giselle. And they're like, well, where do you want to go? And he says somewhere else. She's like, I thought you wanted to go to Tokyo. And he's like, oh, we'll get to Tokyo eventually. Being like, well, he's going to go to Tokyo and he's going to get murdered.
Because after his one scene in Fast and Furious, he says he's going to go to Tokyo as well.
Yeah.
So it's like they tease it like 3 times. All right, Richard, I want to talk about Vin Diesel and how he thinks he's cooler than he is, because this movie further reinforces this with like his new love interest, who's Elena, who is Hobbs's partner from Fast 5. And at the end of Fast 5 and the beginning of this one, she like sides with him, and Hobbs is also like won over and lets him go at the end of Fast 5. And in this film, he goes as far as to betray the law in defense of Dominic Toretto, right? Like they're accused of something, and so they let Shaw go. They let Shaw go against like what the superiors are saying, and Hobbs agrees to do this because he agrees that they need to save. Who do they need to save? They need to save someone in that situation.
Yeah,
it's probably Letty. I can't remember. So if you take that into account, and the fact that Brian has already turned from being a cop from being a cop to a life of crime twice now, because the friendship of Dominic Toretto is so irresistible, it's worth committing treason and becoming a fugitive for. Like that's how cool Vin Diesel thinks Dominic Toretto is that it's worth it. At the end of Fast 4, Fast and Furious, and the start of Fast 5, they literally take down a prison bus They flip a prison bus because
They flipped
Dominic's
the bitch.
is in one of the seats to get him out of going to prison for life.
Yeah.
And like then they're fugitives, they're on the run.
I would expect
Like
you to do
Brian-
the same thing for me.
Okay, but we're good friends. Like this
Your
is my
friendship
question
is worth it.
is Dominic Toretto even that good of a friend? Like,
No, he's good family.
I can barely recall any genuine moments of love that he actually shares between him and Brian in these films. Like Vin Diesel cares about family, but he's not a very warm person. Like when they find out that Mia's pregnant, Mia and Brian are gonna have a baby, he like hugs them both, and then there's a few like kind of like nice things he says to him, but he's very cold and standoffish, and Dominic Toretto is such a fantasy of Vin Diesel. Like he hasn't put the work in to make this character have earned the types of things he stands for. Especially because the end of Furious 7 is very, for obvious reasons, very emphasizing on the love and family between Dom and Brian. But I just didn't believe that he liked Brian that much. He doesn't, he likes he loves Letty and he likes his sister, but I never felt like he was like whenever he does his speeches where he's like the most important people in this room is what
Yeah, that's
matters.
weird how he's just remember in life nothing's ever going to be more important than the people in this room. And it's like some of you have met for the first time and have been working together for like 3 days.
They're doing this for money.
Yeah, they're doing this to get $11 million.
If I was doing that and Vin Diesel started saying that, I'd be like, fuck. Okay, dude, like it's a lot of money though. Like you realize that's why I'm here. So yeah, I would like to put forward the theory that Dominic Toretto's not a good friend.
Wow. That's a pretty big bombshell to drop.
Yeah. All right, so Richard, now we're gonna move on furiously to Furious 7 from 2015, directed by James Wan, a new director to the series, and quite a James Wan's got a fan base. There are a lot of Wan heads out there because he did he did
He did
Aquaman.
The Conjuring and Aquaman.
Yeah.
Those are like his big things. Did he start off Saw as well?
I want to say yes. Let me check. James Wan.
Yeah, because he's like known for horror, and he's going back to horror. So he Saw, and then went to Insidious and Conjuring, and then Furious.
Dead Silence and Death Sentence.
Yeah.
And Doggy Heaven. He directed Doggy Heaven.
Oh,
okay. So Furious 7, directed by James Wan. What does this have on Rotten Tomatoes?
This is like 79.
81, man.
81, nice.
That's a fucking good score.
Yeah.
Like that's a great film, 81. And so what is this movie about?
So this is about the gang chasing down. So Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham's character for the post-credit scene of Fast and Furious 6, sends a bomb to Dom's house after killing Han, and then so they chase him down for revenge. But they can't find him because he keeps popping up everywhere they go. And that's kind of the plot of the film. It's real weird. So they're like, fuck, where is he? Oh, no, he's appeared here. Better keep trying to find him. It's like, he's right there. Like, he's coming to you. But this film, obviously, there has a bunch of crazy action sequences. And then it ends with, so Brian is now with, obviously with Dom's sister Mia, and they've got a baby, and, he leaves to sort of leave this whole life behind him and finally have his happy ever after, because obviously this film had the tragedy behind the scenes of Paul Walker was killed in a car accident, and the film was rewritten, and his brothers came in to be body doubles with Paul Walker's face CGI'd on top of them to complete the film and give Brian O'Connor like the proper send off rather than just kind of killing him off or not talking about the character. And fuck, it was good. I really liked this film, and the
Yeah.
ending is so tasteful and beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like because this film as well. So I mentioned specifically in Fast 5 and 6, you have these amazing set piece finales, and this film, about 40 minutes into it, or 40 minutes to an hour into it, they drive cars out of a plane and parachute into the base they're trying to infiltrate. And then there's another big kind of set piece, but then it ends with just kind of like a chase scene. It's kind of disappointing. And so I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, this one's right. And then the ending came up, which is a scene that I've watched on YouTube before. Like, I knew everything about this scene that was coming up.
It's a meme, the like shot. It's the Instagram post that we did on our popular Instagram.
But yeah, watching it, I cried, and then and I didn't think I would, and it was one of those things like even going out to, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm that attached to the characters and stuff like that. But I think the real life tragedy mixed with that. Brian is actually a really lovable character, and Paul Walker is probably the best actor in the franchise. And then like the music and everything, and it's such a beautifully done, tasteful farewell that I cried when I watched it, and then I was telling Jess about it, and I was explaining what happens, and I started to choke up again. And then I went to play it on TV for her to show her what it was like, and I had to turn it off because I was like, I'm actually just going to cry again.
Oh my gosh, dude.
But
how are you now?
I'm fine now, but I should mention, I forgot to mention this at the top, but I was having a pretty emotional week at the time.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this too. I was so concerned with my with writing up this report in time that I'm like, oh yeah.
So if you've listened this far, I'll tell you the story. So I was coming home from work on Tuesday night, and I was heading home to watch Furious 7, and you probably don't know this about me, but I, up until just recently, I drove a scooter, like a moped, until Tuesday night when I was going straight up Dominion Road in Auckland, and a car pulled out from a stop sign in front of me, and the ground was wet. I didn't have enough time to stop. I only had 5 or so meters, and I was going, I was going the speed limit essentially, so like 40 k's, and I slammed on the brakes. The scooter slid out from under me, and I came off it, and then slid under the car, which then ran me over as it continued on its way across the street. They didn't like slam on the brakes when they realized they might hit a human being, or that they'd just run one over. Like the tire like literally ran over my arm, and I have a bruise there. You might be able to see it, AJ.
Wow.
They got out of the car though, and then they stopped and checked I was alright. But I got taken away in an ambulance, and spent a few hours in hospital. But magically, amazingly, I didn't break anything. I'm more or less back to normal. I couldn't really walk for like a day or two. But yeah, aside from this, some sort of movements with my legs, and that aren't as comfortable as they usually should be, but I am more or less back to normal. But that was a pretty brush with death. I had, which is because we had been joking about who would be the Dom and who would be the Brian in our relationship, and we'd been joking that I was Paul Walker, and in a group chat with Jeremy, the last thing he said to me was that I was going to die in a car crash, and then I almost did.
Look, and no one can say...
Between Furious 6 and 7 as well, watching them.
And no one can say we don't devote ourselves to this podcast. We got drunk for the Hangover trilogy.
I got run over by a car for Fast and Furious.
I was very worried about you, and I'm very glad to hear that you're okay. But part of me was just like, you fucking doing this to one-up me, aren't you? Piece of shit.
This is like when you watch the Scream TV series.
I'm going to have to drive a car out of a plane to get back at you. Wow, yeah.
But yeah, so please send your love and support. But yeah, so I because I'm not a particularly emotional person, And so I think, taking my accident and being in hospital and good spirits, I think just like a chance to be emotional, because obviously, people are like sending support and stuff like that. But then actually crying during Furious 7. But to be fair, in my defense, it's a very beautiful moment.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely.
And also the song "See You Again." What a fucking banger that is. That's for a small amount of time. That was the most viewed song on YouTube. It's got like 4.6 billion views.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like it just overtook Gangnam Style, and then like less than 2 months later, it was taken over by Despacito. So it's like Gangnam Style held it for like 5 years or something like that, and then See You Again held it for like a week.
There you go.
Yeah.
What a story, Mark. I would have been in such a moral quandary if you'd died, because I have like had to recreate. Would I have to make this podcast?
Get my sister to finish it for me.
I'd get your sister, but then also pieces of your audio from previous podcasts.
Yeah. But then what would be the tasteful send off you'd give me at the end?
I'd just I'd sing "See You Again."
Can you sing it anyway?
And I'll tell you all about it when I see you again.
Actually, this ties nicely into Vin Diesel. Have you seen the video of Vin Diesel at the MTV Movie Awards? Because this won a bunch of MTV Movie Awards because it's that kind of movie. Even although Vin Diesel thought it was headed for Best Picture nomination, there's quotes of him out there saying that he genuinely believes this is going to get Oscars. Yeah. But there's a video of him being like, "Oh, thanks so much, everyone. Like, this is for the family, for the
It's just a Sylvester Stallone impression now. Adrian!
Wait. The Fast and Furious family. He's like, anyway, this is all for Paul. I guess the only thing left to say is, it's been a long day without you, my friend. And it's like,
Diesel.
What are you doing? He thinks he's a real good singer. There's videos of him singing "Stay" by Rihanna for some reason, and then there's also quite a few videos of him singing "See You Again" like in interviews and stuff. What did you think of the film?
I loved this one. I was like, it's such fucking carry on, isn't it? It's such bullshit. It's such a load of shit, this movie, but that's why it's so great.
Because you were messaging a group chat with me about what you kind of thought of the films as you were watching them, and we were pretty negative on them. But this is the first one where it seemed like it got you on board with the turn your brain off.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Kind of thing.
And I think
this is the first one where you took it at face value, I think.
Yeah. I would say that this is the quintessential Fast and Furious movie, and I think no matter how many sequels they make in the future, this will be the one that people think of when they think of the series as a whole. Like this is the Fast and Furious legacy, in my opinion. And it's also the 8th highest grossing film of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is probably, when you look at the highest grossing films of all time, I actually feel like this one stands out as being a bit different from, because the other ones are like, I don't know, like Star
Marvel
Wars
movies.
and Marvel, and then it's like this movie about dropping cars out of planes is.
Yeah, I think as well that this was like my one holdout from the top 10.
Yeah.
That I hadn't seen. I mean, like at the same time though, like it's. Because you look, it's like a couple above it is like Jurassic World, which I feel like is the same. Like the
you know what it is
event films and big franchises.
Yeah, but this one doesn't have, other than Avatar, this is the only one on that list that's like, or only modern one on that list that's like not got comic books or like an extended history of
Titanic.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Never mind. Well, no, Titanic does as the real thing.
Yeah, well,
that's Titanic's extended universe.
I was saying I'd formed that word in my mouth before you said history.
This is our second film franchise in a row to feature at least one film with the word 7 in it, after Seven Samurai / The Magnificent Seven. And we got a message on Facebook this morning from a listener named David Ross, who told us apparently James Wan wanted to call the film Furious 7 as a nod to the Seven Samurai.
Yeah, I was reading that the film officially, according to the director, is called like Furious SEVEN. And he said it's 7 because of Seven Samurai. And he said, like, look at this film, like it's Seven Samurai, but instead of swords, it's cars. And he said, like, this. He says, like, this film is classic Kurosawa, according to James Wan.
That's good that James Wan can say that about his own film. So we've got Francis Ford Coppola, and what other franchise both has Francis Ford Coppola and Kurosawa working on it, man? It's crazy. So the scene where the cars drive out of the plane and parachute into like this foresty road area is so funny to me because it's such an in-your-face way of being like, this isn't about DVD players anymore. You know, like this is how far we've come. And I think what I love most about it is how not foolproof their plan is. Like, because if that was your plan, you'd think they would be quite down to like the minute details of it, right? But they just parachute cars into forest with like a vague idea of where they're going to land. Yeah. And thank God none of them crash into a tree. Like you could just get decapitated by a stray branch going through your window. Like they don't proof it from that. And Roman, who's the last one Tyrese Gibson, who's the last one to reverse the car out of the plane, he's too scared to do it. And the only reason he does is because Tej opens his chute, which drags the car out, which that could have gone very easily wrong.
Yeah, because he's like fucking spinning around for so long. Yeah.
And so I loved how silly that was, but they actually did it for real. That's not CGI.
Yeah, it's they like drove cars out of the plane and had cameramen in wingsuits. Like, it's insane. And then also the other great, I was trying to think of the other great moment in that film, because you got that, and then there's also the driving through 3 skyscrapers in Abu Dhabi.
So this is my favorite scene in the franchise, a lot of people seem to cite it as their favorite scene. They drive a car through a skyscraper and land in the neighboring building. But for me, it's the fact that they do it again. That's what cements it for me as like the best scene, is that it's not just because I knew they did it once and I didn't know they did it twice. So it's covering 3 buildings. That to me is it's not as good of a scene if it's only one building. It's crucial that it's the 3 buildings, and the third building is like by accident as well because their brakes stop working. Like brakes don't work, and they're like, oh yeah, keep going. It's so fun. I actually cracked up. It's like the first time the whole franchise actually burst out laughing at how. Yeah,
there's a few of those moments in the films where you're like, haha, yes, like
fuck yeah.
It's those kind of moments where you just get really excited. But yeah, that is a fantastic scene. That is one of the scenes as well that, like, when you watch like how they did Furious 7, that was his brother, Paul Walker's brother, was in that scene with the CGI over the top. You famously have a very sensitive eye for face replacements and de-aging. What did you think of it in this film?
The only place I noticed it once when Brian says something, can't remember what, some like insignificant line. He looked a bit funny, and the famous scene at the end where Vin Diesel looks at him in the car.
And he looks there.
He looks a bit rubbery. Like
what? But the thing is, because there's actually quite a few scenes of it in the film. Like the Abu Dhabi one is one that you might not realize, but I think you kind of notice it a bit more, like especially in that ending scene, because your brain subconsciously knows this has to not be him.
Right.
Whereas like basically any other scene in the movie, you can be like, oh yeah, whatever.
Exactly.
But because I was reading like how Jordana Brewster, who plays Mia, she was on another film and wasn't available till the end of the Fast and Furious, the Furious 7 shoot. And so all of every single scene she's in with Brian was actually with her brother. It was after Paul Walker had died. So which is quite sad that, you know, like she's doing all these scenes, especially like in the start of the movie and stuff like that, every single one of them isn't with Paul.
Yeah, that is sad. Well, you've basically covered all I had to say about Paul Walker, which is good.
Yeah.
No need to dwell too much on it. One last thing I want to say about Furious 7 is that Kurt Russell is like my favourite character.
Yeah, he's great. And they didn't do like an easy... a twist villain or anything like that.
Yeah, he's not a twist villain. He's just he gets along with them and he's their friend.
Yeah.
And I really liked that.
One other thing, I just remembered that fits into your anti-Vin Diesel thing. Or anti-Dom Toretto anyway. So you see him and Letty's wedding in this film. and he's wearing a wife beater to his own wedding. But then at the end of the film, when he's at the beach, he's wearing like a button-up top. It's like, it's so funny.
It's so gearhead to wear a singlet to your wedding, eh?
Yeah, but it's like it's like a joke, I guess. Like, you're not.
Do you reckon it's a joke?
I think so. It's I think you're supposed to laugh at that scene, not be like, "Wow, that's so beautiful." But yeah, man, I just can't talk enough about how beautiful the ending of this movie is. Like,
yeah,
the look on Paul Walker's face when he like, "Thought you could leave without saying goodbye," and then he like looks up, and then they have that like the moment, like you said, the Instagram shot, and just like he's just got the most beautiful smile, and the way he like smiles and then is like shakes his head and they start driving is like, it's so well done. It's such a subtle and beautiful thing that, like, how was it in this movie?
Yeah. Except if you didn't know Paul Walker died, and then it does like the shots of all their friendship, you'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
You'd be like, all right. Because I do think, and we'll get to this now, this probably, in a perfect world, should have been the final film in the series.
Yeah, and even with when we get to continue the franchise, there's more there as well. But yeah.
Because the next film we have that came out in 2017 was The Fate of the Furious, directed by F. Gary Gray. What do you think this is on Rotten Tomatoes?
This is like 69.
This is 67, so we're the lowest of the new wave now.
Yeah,
lowest since Fast and Furious, the fourth film. And what is this movie about?
So Dom is convinced to work against his family by the cyber terrorist Cypher, who's Charlize Theron with dreadlocks, which was suggested by her assistant. Charlize Theron was like, yeah, my assistant just said, like, you should have dreads, and it's like, get a new assistant. So it's revealed eventually that she is using Dom's child that Dom didn't know he had, and we didn't know he had.
From Elena from previous, who he shacked up with when he thought Letty was dead, and then immediately ditched when he found out she was alive, with her permission. But she also knew she was pregnant. I don't know. Continue.
Yeah. But anyway, so she's using that as like a bargaining chip against, and Cypher ends up killing Elena as well. And then so she's like trying to start a nuclear war or some bullshit. But it ends with this, like, the scene for the trailer is like, the submarine chase, where they're on like a where exactly are they? But they're on ice anyway.
They're in Russia.
And yeah, it's ice.
Yeah, so there's...
Yeah, and we're also introduced to... so we get Kurt Russell's Mr. Nobody, and then there's like Little Nobody, who's Scott Eastwood, our second Eastwood franchise. A second franchise where an Eastwood plays a character who like doesn't have a name in quotation marks. And they seem to be trying really hard to make him like Paul Walker.
Yeah, I did. I clicked to that as well. This is the new Paul Walker. Yeah, so there is something clearly missing from this film, which is pretty sad. I don't know if I'd necessarily say I need Paul Walker to buy into a Fast and Furious movie, but it's more for me, it feels like watching a bunch of grieving actors pretend like nothing's wrong. And
I know what you mean. And I mean, it just is Paul Walker as well. Like he was just the most likable character in the films. So it's hard to get on board with them. And also I wanted to say as well, so there's the scene in this movie where it's like Dom and Cypher like bust in and shoot up the place, and then Letty's like, what's the matter, Dom? You're gonna turn your back on family? And he like turns his back on them, and then like literally, and then makes out with Cypher. And that was the kind of like button on the trailer. So it was like all the action scenes, and it's like, oh, Dom's evil now, which makes this our second 2017 franchise with basically the same plot and trailer, because The Last Night was the same fucking thing with Optimus Prime, that it's like, Optimus, you know, turn your back on family, and then he makes out with Charlize Theron. But yeah, no, the Fate of the Furious and The Last Night are, turn your giant hulking growly voice main character against his family.
Yeah, and speaking of that hulking growly voice main character and him making out with Cypher, Vin Diesel gave himself 3 love interests in this film. Because that's how irresistible Vin Diesel thinks he is. So he's with Letty. Him and Elena, like, she's like, oh, we had a kid. So even though they don't, they're not still romantically involved, it's still like, it's in the conversation. And then Charlize Theron like kisses him to show, her
turned his back on
ownership over him, which the character of Dom Toretto isn't into. Like, he doesn't want to kiss her back, but I bet Vin Diesel was into it.
Oh, hell yeah, anyone would be.
Yeah. So, again, it's just Vin Diesel genuinely thinks he's that hot of a property that he can convincingly have a movie where there are 3 women fighting over it.
The other thing about this film is because there's a lot of emotional scenes in this one. Like, for instance, when Cypher is threatening to kill Dom's baby and then kills Elena right in front of him. And you very clearly can see that Vin Diesel is trying to act and is doing what he thinks is probably thinks is a pretty good job.
Yeah. Not that he hasn't done good jobs before. It's like this is him at his peak,
Yeah, but it's funny seeing someone who clearly thinks they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Like you can imagine, like, he's after that when they call cut, he's like, man, I had to go to a pretty dark place. Like, yeah.
He had to think about hunting wabbits.
I'm Vin fucking Diesel.
So I think the best part of this film is Hobbs and Shaw. And overall, I'd say my favorite, because this is the movie where they interact and, secure.
Yeah, people were like, we want this Hobbs and Shaw spin-off.
Yeah, and my favorite scene is when Shaw is killing all the bad guys while looking after Toretto's baby, and he puts like the headphones on.
That's the best scene in the whole franchise. Holy
it's
shit.
So good.
That's
so
like,
good.
oh my God, I was like cheering. It's so funny. And Jason Statham is so good in it. So, the Cypher's on a plane with Dom's baby, and then Jason Statham goes up there and has the baby in like a like little baby holder thing.
Like a crib. Like
crib kind of thing. And and he puts like music in the baby's ears, and then is like, it's gonna get pretty loud, and then like goes and like kills all these bad guys, but keeps on like checking in on the baby, and so you get these like POV shots of the baby of Jason Statham, like just like it's so funny, man.
And what's funny about it from a plot structure point of view is like they probably knew at that point that they wanted Jason Statham to join the family, but they're like, oh, but he fucking murdered like 2 of the main characters. What can we do to redeem him? Let's literally have him save a baby. Like it's a comically angelic thing to do.
But then at the end of the film, Vin's like, you're my brother, like, we're family. We're family. And it's like he killed Han and no one cares. Because so he just joins the family because fuck Han.
How would Han feel?
Yeah.
Imagine if Han could see you guys now.
# justice for Han.
Justice for Han.
Yeah. So, like he doesn't even say, sorry, I killed your friend. Vin's just like, like, I trusted you. I saw it in your eyes. You're my brother.
And then he names the baby Brian.
Yeah, he names the baby Brian as well, which in universe is kind of weird.
It's misguided.
That he's just like named his baby after his friend who moved away.
Who's not there.
Yeah, I mean, but then how would you feel if they named him Paul?
You'd have to not do a big deal about it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like, this is Paul. It'd have to be like, I think Paul's a nice name or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, it wouldn't be Fast and Furious if we didn't briefly touch on the testosterone-fueled
here we go
man-baby fights that apparently are rife with behind the scenes and sort of started with this film, or at least came to light with this film. There's a lot of shit out there, and I like Dwayne Johnson, but he's kind of one of the biggest. I don't really like Tyrese Gibson, and I don't like Vin Diesel, but like Dwayne Johnson kind of started it, and I've kind of summarized it because there's like scrawls of Instagram paragraphs because it's all on Instagram. Fuck, these people are babies.
Yeah.
Stop
Jason
writing.
Statham should save them.
So Dwayne Johnson posted this during the filming of Fate, Fate of the Furious. He said, "There's no other franchise that gets my blood boiling more than this one. An incredible hard-working crew, Universal Studios Entertainment have been great partners as well. My female co-stars are all amazing and I love them. My male co-stars, however, are a different story. Some conduct themselves as stand-up men and true professionals, while others don't. The ones that don't are too chicken shit to do anything about it anyway. Candy asses. When you watch this movie next April and it seems like I'm not acting in some of these scenes and my blood is legit boiling, you're right. Bottom line is, it'll play great for the movie and it fits this Hobbs character that's embedded in my DNA extremely well. The producer in me is happy about this part. Final week on Fast 8 and I will finish strong."
For crazy, I've read that before and I thought that was Vin Diesel that wrote that, but
No, it was Dwayne Johnson.
Wow, okay, yeah, interesting.
And everyone assumed he was talking about Vin Diesel, but this is not confirmed. Tyrese Gibson also downplayed it in a statement, and so did Dwayne Johnson a few days later, doing another post which emphasizes team efforts, in which you can almost read, "My agent made me write this," between the lines.
Yeah.
And then after this, Michelle Rodriguez came out and said that female actors aren't treated very well on the set, which is later, like Vin Diesel, who's not really doing, like, he's posting very vague Instagram videos of him talking about how tired he is. And then, like, he posted a video with Michelle Rodriguez and was like, "Everything's fine. We don't, treat our female co-stars poorly." And then after this, a completely different thing where Tyrese Gibson absolutely threw his toys out of the cot when Hobbs and Shaw was announced. He called out Dwayne Johnson for delaying the release of Fast 9, which is such a weird thing to get angry at your co-star for. It's so weird. And he threatened to not appear in future Fast and Furious installments alongside Dwayne. I think everything is quote-unquote settled now, but Tyrese Gibson still spells Dwayne as D-Wayne in his Instagram posts, so there's clearly some bitterness still in
there's
there.
a lot of posts from Tyrese Gibson that you go look them up because they're quite funny. But yeah, like the whole thing of, because I remember when this was going on, you and I were chatting about it, and just like imagine being Tyrese Gibson and thinking that you have as much pull as Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
Exactly, man.
Because he's like, if Dwayne, if you do, because Fast 9 was supposed to come out this year, and as actually, funnily enough, because Fate of the Furious feels like it just came out, but now the gap between Fate and Fast 9, I think, is the longest in the franchise's history by like 2 weeks. But because it's like there was 3 and 4 were 3 years apart. But this one's like 3, it's like slightly longer, and but the rest of them have been 2 years apart.
Yeah, so...
But yeah, like, because Tyrese Gibson thinks that fans value the regularity of these films.
Yeah.
And that's why people see them, is because you can count on there being one every 2 years, but...
What's disappointing to me is to see Tyrese Gibson do something that his character Roman would do. You know, like, you assume when someone plays a character like Roman that they're self-aware enough to know that this is the character they're playing. But I'm surprised someone, as Tyrese Gibson has proven himself to be, would be okay with being the butt of the joke in all of these Fast and Furious movies, because it seems like that would piss him off. Anyway.
As well, there's... because one quite funny bit that was Tyrese Gibson, with like example of his character doing something like this is when they find out that like all of them are in like the top 10 most wanted list, and but Roman's number 11. That was quite a funny scene. But because Roman asks Mr. Nobody where everyone else ranks in the list, and he's like, like he's 6, she's 8, 9, and 10. And he skips 7 because, in tribute to Paul Walker, that would be like his number because it only, left during the 7th film.
Yeah. There's another feud that's sort of broken out now. Well, not a feud, but you probably know more about this than me because I didn't really look into it, but you mentioned it earlier in the episode and to me today about like in Hobbs and Shaw, there needed to be equal amount of punches thrown by each of the stars. What you tell it. You tell it better than me. You tell it.
I'll just quickly find the article. Okay, so there was an article that came out recently. It was from the Wall Street Journal, which goes behind the scenes of the Fast and Furious franchise. Talks about the demands of its male leads, specifically Vin Diesel, Dwayne Johnson, and Jason Statham, and the lengths they go to in order to avoid being seen as weak. So they've all got pretty fragile egos by the sounds of it. Yeah, it's pretty obvious with I think it's been known about Vin Diesel for a while, but so this is the statement. According to producers and crew members on the films, Mr. Statham, 51 years old, negotiated an agreement with the studio that limits how badly he can be beaten up on screen. Mr. Diesel, 52, has his younger sister, a producer on the films, police the number of punches he takes, and Mr. Johnson, 47, enlists producers, editors, and fight coordinators to help him make sure he always gives as good as he gets. So, the fights for the female characters, Michelle Rodriguez and Ronda Rousey fight, they don't have the same kind of score keeping, but apparently Jason Statham is known to swing by the editing room to weigh in on fight scenes. So no moment in the movies appears too small for the actors to nitpick, and a scene in 2017's The Fate of the Furious that required Mr. Johnson, Dwayne Johnson, to be lying on the ground at Mr. Diesel's feet. He insisted his character be at least sitting up, according to a post-production crew member. Mr. Diesel's sister, Samantha Vincent, weighs in on rehearsals and edits. People familiar with the situation said, he's falling down right here, she once observed during a fight rehearsal. And then saying we need to make sure that he gets his licks back in. It's interesting because I feel like out of the three of them, Jason Statham would have the most sense of humor about himself.
Yeah,
and there's because there's one it says about how he's about how badly he can be beaten up on screen. And so I imagine that's, to do with making sure your face is still good enough for the thing. But it seems like, and this is just my image of these people as well, is that Dwayne Johnson is very much knows the product of his films and what he's trying to sell. And a lot of it comes from that. Because even Rampage originally had a sad ending, but he came in and changed it because he's like, no, people come to my films because they want this, and so I think he's real into that old school action hero that can't get hurt, and I think he's trying to help that. Whereas I think Vin Diesel is a little bitch who can't handle looking weak. I think so. I would say Jason Statham seems to have a sense of humor about himself. The Rock knows what his fans want, and Vin Diesel has a very fragile ego.
Yeah. That's what I want to believe.
Yeah, that's what I want to believe. But I actually think The Rock has a pretty fragile ego as well. If you look at his Twitter, when people
that's true,
didn't review Baywatch so badly, when he did this whole tirade of the fans love it but the critics hate it, let's take down those fucking critics. And a singer I like, Charlie Simpson, tweeted to his friend about Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle being bad, and then The Rock replied to it and was like, oh, how about this, how about we listen to your fucking music and see how you like it, and I'll tell you it's shit. And it's
Welcome to the Jungle's great.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I disagree with Charlie Simpson on this, but it is also The Rock's just trolling through Twitter trying to find negative reviews to his film, and then just calling people out that are having especially something like Baywatch, having a sense of humor about it being bad, or because eventually a year later they won a Razzie for it, and he was like, haha, yeah, I'm accepting this. It didn't turn out as well as we wanted, but we still had a fun time. It's that's the attitude I want to see from a movie star when their film is bad.
Yeah. Well, speaking of The Rock, we're now moving on to Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw, the final film in the franchise so far. Ooh. This was directed by David Leitch, and what do you think it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's 67 or something, isn't it?
67, so same as Fate of the Furious.
Yeah.
And what is this movie about?
So Luke Hobbs and Deckard Shaw from The Fate of the Furious are forced to work together to battle the evil Brixton Law, who is a cybernetically enhanced human, when Shaw's sister steals a super virus which is capable of wiping out the human race. Their battle with Brixton takes them all across the globe, eventually leading to a standoff in Samoa.
Yes, and I guess spoilers for Hobbs and Shaw, it's still in theaters, so there's your warning. Yeah. like this film. I thought it was fun. It doesn't have Vin Diesel, which was great, but it does have Jason Statham and The Rock, which are great, and it has Idris Elba, which is great. And then Ryan Reynolds shows up.
Yeah.
And has like extended scenes, and then Kevin Hart shows up at one point.
Yeah, and it's so funny because
yeah.
this is directed by David Leitch, who did Deadpool 2.
Right.
And so, Deadpool shows up, and then Peter shows up from Deadpool 2 as well. He's the other FBI agent. And because I'd heard, I saw a comment that was like, oh, I had the 2 cameos spoiled for me. And so I was like, okay, I'll make sure not to read any more about Hobbs and Shaw, but I knew there was celebrity cameos coming up. And then Ryan Reynolds shows up, playing Deadpool, essentially.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds has got a super interesting career of where he's at now compared to like just pre-Deadpool, what the kind of roles he shows up in. And then so he's the guy that recruits Hobbs, and then we see the guy that recruits Shaw, and it's Rob Delaney, who's Peter from. And I thought those were the 2 cameos. And then just Kevin Hart shows up, and it's
as an
like,
air marshal named Dinkley.
Yeah,
but he's Dinkley.
It's a very funny scene.
Yeah,
and Ryan Reynolds' stuff is very funny as well. Like when he's sitting in the diner he's talking to him on the phone, and it's closed.
Yeah,
it's very funny.
Ryan Reynolds is named Locke, and Kevin Hart's named Dinkley, which is like, these are very, we want our own spin-off surnames. Locke and Dinkley. You don't just call characters Locke.
I mean, it does seem like they're bringing in...
they were trying to construct their own team.
That Ryan Reynolds would, show up in a sequel, potentially. But it's very clear that they only had Ryan Reynolds for like a day as well. Or 2 days, because he appears in a post-credit scene where he's now clean-shaven, and he's in 2 post-credit scenes where he's only in 1 location. But we see him in the film like 3 or 4 times, and he's only ever in the same location.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that because I have some. I basically only. I didn't hate this film, but I don't really have too much good to say about it. Like I have more. For the record,
I really enjoyed it. I had a great time.
I had a great time too. Yeah, it's.
Oh, and also the other thing, Eddie Marsan plays a scientist in this, who's also in Deadpool 2, because it's like they keep just having the whole cast of Deadpool 2.
I keep trying to figure out who it was. It kind of feels like this franchise has started copying the MCU's homework. Without really understanding the narrative reasons for what drive a lot of these decisions. And this, to me, those mid and post-credits, there are 3 mid-post-credit scenes, which I think are some of the worst mid and post-credit scenes I've ever seen.
Yeah, they're very strange, because whenever I go to a movie like this where there's a potential of a post-credit scene, I'll as soon as the credits start, I'll Google like post-credit scene, like Hobbs and Shaw post-credit scene. And then it was like 2 out, because there's one that's just like, there's a website that you go to and it says like, does it have one? And it says yes, stay to the end of the credits. And it was like how Hobbs and Shaw's mid-credit scene sets up the sequel. And it doesn't.
That's the thing, is that first of all, it's two scenes spread over 3 post-credit scenes. So the first one is Ryan Reynolds talking to Hobbs over the phone. Then the second one is Hobbs talking to Shaw over
swatting
the phone.
Shaw, yeah.
Yeah, and then it goes back to the first scene for the final one, which is, I have so many issues with that, and I'm going to try articulate them because I don't know if I can. Like, first of all, it's confusing to say Hobbs is here, then he's here, then go to the final one, then he's here again.
Yeah, like if it was like Hobbs and Ryan Reynolds and then just Shaw and then Hobbs and Ryan Reynolds again, it'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And also they are not the scenes with Ryan Reynolds and Hobbs are not a pair of scenes that needed to be split up. They should have just been stuck together.
Yeah, and also, so there's like 3 credit scenes. One starts like right after the credits, but so the credits start, and then we go to some more, and we have the big family reunion, which then cuts to Ryan Reynolds and Hobbs, and then we have more credits, and then we have the swatting one, and then we have more credits, and then we have the final. Yeah, so it's like very strange.
It's very strange editing, right? Like it feels like these were the final scenes of the film, because the actual film, the credits start rolling maybe a touch too early as well. Like they've just defeated the villain and then the credits roll. And it's like, oh my God, okay. And so this is, I think that they were like, we need to give this movie post-credits. Like, it didn't have them. These were just the final scenes of the film.
Yeah, which and it does look like, oh, we got Ryan Reynolds back. Oh, I've shaved. Is that okay? Oh yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. And also probably the biggest problem with it is they don't do what post credit scenes are supposed to do. They're just two jokes. They're two sets. They're 3 scenes and 2 jokes, and it's like, okay, well that's not really. And I don't know. I did like the movie, but I felt Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Hart both felt like scenes from a different movie.
Yeah, like they show up, and because I was thinking about this watching the movie, because I was like, how often do we do spin-offs on this podcast? Like, we've had Earbud, but that's like but then I was thinking,
of spin-offs.
Yeah, like as a series of spin-offs, and something like Ear Buddies, which technically spins off, I think, the 4th one when they actually have babies, but then they're different babies, whatever. Yeah. But it also fundamentally like changes the rules of the world. Like now the dogs talk, and it's like it's a different.
Great example of what you're talking about is Puss in Boots as well.
Yeah, Puss in Boots, where it's like it's a different genre, really.
Yeah.
And because I was like, Hobbs and Shaw is like if you were to describe a spin-off, it's like a character who's not the main one, getting their own film.
Yeah.
That's really it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this is one where this is a classic spin-off that doesn't really change the rules of the world, but at the same time it does, because we're now introduced to like cybernetically enhanced like superhumans. But then at the same time, the progression of the franchise, this is the logical next step. It just happens to be in a spin-off. If Fast 9 had a cybernetically enhanced human, I would not question it.
Yeah.
But because it's in a spin-off, I'm a little bit like, oh, they're changing stuff. But then it's like, I guess they're not really.
To me, it's more that those 2 cameos in particular felt like they were from different films.
Yeah, and
Ryan,
it's almost...
Ryan Reynolds' shtick is not something that the people who have been watching Fast and Furious and what favourite films is Fast and Furious? Like, they don't like Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, no, they probably like Deadpool, though.
That's true.
I imagine the crossover of Deadpool and Fast and Furious is a circle. But yeah, it is. Yeah,
it's a very strange movie.
Yeah, like Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Hart scenes feel more out of place than a superhuman.
Yeah. Another couple of things I found kind of weird about this film is that there are 2 examples. And one of them is what we've just been talking about, where it breaks the rule of 3s, right? So the rule of 3s is like a vague rule in screenwriting where it's like, it's basically you do 3 of something, right? You do it once, you do it again to establish a pattern, then you do it a 3rd final time. And in this, there are 2 celebrity cameos, right? There's Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Hart, and so
unless you count Rob Delaney
or Cliff Curtis, maybe, but you don't, right? They're not, they're not as famous as Ryan Reynolds. And I knew they were in those. Well, I knew Cliff Curtis was in the movie beforehand. But like it felt like if you're going to do 2 celebrity cameos, you do 10 celebrity cameos.
Yeah, like the post-credit scene should have had a 3rd one. Because as well, like you associate like it needed.
Well, you don't find out who the big bad guy is because it's just a disembodied voice. And I was waiting. I thought that's what the post-credit scene was going to reveal.
Because he's like, "Don't you remember me, Hobbs?"
Yeah. And I was like, "It's going to be Hobbs' mum from Samoa." Like,
well, because I mean, who would it be? Because it could be Hobbs' dad, because we don't know him.
Nah, he doesn't talk to him like how a dad would talk to a son, though. The only in-universe character would be Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
Cypher.
But and then there's also the when Jason Statham and his sister were kids, they used to run like
grifts,
based on famous musicians. So there's the Keith Moon and the Mick Jagger, and then they do the Mick Jagger.
And they do the Keith Moon, the Mick Jagger, and when they say it, the words come up on screen in the Fast and Furious font. The Keith Moon, and then we used to do the Mick Jagger. And one of those, the Keith Moon happens maybe 20 minutes into the film. The Mick Jagger doesn't happen for ages, like over an hour and a bit into the film, and then they don't do a 3rd one. And again, it's like you are creating a visual motif by having the words appear on screen. You need to do that more than twice, because otherwise you're not establishing a pattern.
And also, so the film it doesn't open with it, but early on in the film, we see Hobbs and Shaw getting ready for their day, and it's like split screen. Yeah. And then that motif just disappears as well.
Yeah, totally. And so I would have had Hobbs introduce a 3rd grift towards the end of the film.
You would have had Hobbs do it.
Yeah. So it's like a subversion of it, right? When and it's in Samoa and they do a haka and it's like we're on Hobbs's home turf, and so there was room for Hobbs to be like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna do
Israel Kamaka of Vilvaole.
Sure,
Even though he's Hawaiian, but it was filmed. It's very clearly Hawaii, not Samoa.
Right. And so, you know what I mean? Like, that's how you do that visual language payoff, is now it's the guy who you didn't think did grifts when he was a kid. Here's his one now.
Yeah.
You know?
The whole Samoa thing as well, it's very strange because it feels very contractually obligated by, like, it's in The Rock's contract. You know, it's very production note from The Rock. But it's like, it almost feels like pandering, but it's to such a specific audience. It's like this, it's very strange, and
I have some thoughts on that, but I don't know if I'm socially aware enough to want to just come out and bark them.
But
you know
but
it
is also like, I mean, I guess it's a commentary on Hollywood as well, that like he's like, you walk in and then you see like every Samoan looking actor in Hollywood, and then he goes, yeah, this is my family, we're all related, and it's like, you guys don't look like family. You just like,
okay, I'll pose this as a question instead of saying this is definite, and I'm genuinely and I apologize if this sounds offensive, because I hate when people complain about virtue signaling, because it's like, what, you know, oh, they put a gay character in my TV show. It's like, would you rather there just never get any gay characters and things, you know? Like, you need to do what people consider virtue signaling to get to a point where it's not virtue signaling anymore.
Yeah.
So I've got a question and if you are Samoan listening to this, very interested to hear your perspective. Is it kind of feeling less like we're going to Samoa and more like Hollywood going, isn't this cute? Isn't Samoa so interesting? Look at, you know, I'm worried about that. Like, because the same thing's happening with New Zealand, I think. Isn't Pacific cultures, right? Like, isn't it so interesting? Look at this, other European nations. Look at these interesting people in these little countries.
Condescending.
Yeah. So I'm worried about this, but perhaps you know, I'm on the
but at the same time, I think that like people, Samoan culture would get a kick out of this movie as well.
Sure, but that's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
Then next you're going to get a film that isn't honoring about it, and it's just real shitty.
It's the whole thing of like, when a movie does well, people learn the wrong lessons from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I guess that's Hobbs and Shaw, really.
Yep, that's Hobbs and Shaw, dude.
Yep, take the kids down to Hobbs and Shaw for a swim.
Okay, well, Richard, before we move on to a couple of segments, but we will be wrapping this up. We haven't got too many segments to go because this is a long episode. How would you rank the films?
Oh, very good question. So, for me, the best one is Furious 7, followed by Fast 5. And then I would go... So it's interesting for me, because I was talking about this with Jeremy the other night because I saw Hobbs and Shaw with him, that there's a few ties for me. So it's like Furious 7 and then Fast 5 are like 1 and 2. And then Fate of the Furious and Hobbs and Shaw are about the same for me. And then Fast and Furious 6 and then Tokyo Drift. And then 1 and 2 are about the same for me. And then 4 is the worst one.
I think, I'm probably pretty similar.
Yeah,
I think I'd go Furious 7, then probably Hobbs and Shaw, then Fast 5, then Fast and Furious 6, then Fate of the Furious, then the next ones you can fight over last place.
Like, because a lot of them, like the ones that are tied, it's like depending on which cool part of it I think about, I'll prefer that one. Like, because, you know, I can be like, fuck, like Fate of the Furious is so much better than Hobbs and Shaw because it has the Jason Statham with the baby part. Or I could be like, oh, Hobbs and Shaw's way better because Fate of the Furious has this boring shit in it, and then Hobbs and Shaw has the bit where Idris Elba like skids under a truck.
Yeah.
And on his Transformer mobile.
There you have it, guys. That's the Cult Pop Shop Boys official Fast and Furious ranking. And so we've talked a lot on this podcast, Richard, about lots of different things. Vin Diesel was one of the things we've talked about a lot. But what we always talk about is titles a lot on this podcast.
We should have a segment where each week it's called We Talk About Vin Diesel a lot on this podcast.
Yeah, let's do it. So this segment was pretty much invented because of how much the titles of these films had affected my life. I haven't even seen them, right? But it's Fast and Furious and Final Destination which really ignited my desire to see consistent titling schemes across multiple movies in a franchise.
Yeah.
Like, this is the origin of it. And so, if you'll allow me, I'm going to do a Conan O'Brien style monologue on my thoughts on, except it's not going to be very funny, I guess. So
yeah, I don't know why you just specifically said Conan.
because I look up to him. He's my dad. So the weirdest thing about the Fast and Furious titles is that some of them seem to indicate that the creative voices don't really place any importance on the titles. So you've got ones like Fast and Furious, Fast 5, Fast and Furious 6, Furious 7. They all feel designed so that when you go to the movies, you just say, hi, can I have a ticket to Fast and Furious? You know?
Yeah.
They ostensibly have the same title.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you get things like Tokyo Drift or The Fate of the Furious, which feels like the creative voices are very interested in the titles.
Yeah.
Fate of the Furious especially is a choice. You know, it's like a cheesy pun in a film that doesn't really think it's a cheesy pun.
Yeah, for anyone that hasn't picked up on it, do you want to just explain where Fate of the Furious comes from?
If it's Fast 8, Fate.
Yeah,
Fate
and because it was
Furious.
like advertised with hashtag F8.
Yeah.
Even before the title was announced, people were like, the
Yeah.
shorthand for it was F8.
Yeah. It's also of note that there do seem to be patterns within the certain sequels themselves. So, like, an obvious one would be Fast and Furious and Fast and Furious 6, which, you know, they're not terribly consistent in terms of where they would be in the series, but they're obviously part of the same technique. But then I'd also argue that Too Fast, Too Furious, Fast 5, and Furious 7 are all playing the same game.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
But also, it's worth mentioning, this may be in your later in your hilarious monologue, but how so you have fast, and the titles are different everywhere, and I don't know if you've written them all down.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
But and at least when I watched it, that Fast and Furious 6, the title card in the film says Furious 6,
Yeah.
and Furious 7, which, to be fair, in New Zealand is called Fast and Furious 7. The title card says Fast and Furious 7. But I believe in the States it has Furious SEVEN.
Yes, yeah. So the titles that we went off for this podcast are the American titles, which I chose to go with officially because I think they are funnier. And
Yeah,
there's
and
more to
because
talk
the
about.
New Zealand or the international ones tidy them up a little bit as well.
Yeah, yeah. So the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift is at least a semblance of what I feel each movie probably should have gone for, like the OG movie with the specific subtitle. But instead it stands out like a sore thumb as the only sequel to reincorporate the Fast and the Furious from the original film back into the series, with the exception of The Fate of the Furious, which loses consistency points for obvious reasons. Tokyo Drift is probably my favorite title, but in a way the lack of pattern has kind of become the pattern. You know, you get so used to the titles for the series operating on such different wavelengths that Fast and Furious 6 is disappointing. It's like, okay. Yeah, so Too Fast, Too Furious is probably objectively the stupidest title in the series.
Yeah.
And one of the series' longest lasting legacies is whenever a movie has an untitled sequel announced, we've talked about this before, that you go to the Reddit thread for it and it'll be like, too blank. So like, I remember when the next James Bond movie was announced, people were like, Too Sky, Too Fall. And then someone was like, Chicken Little 2. And I was like, that's so funny.
It's not a funny joke. Although I did see one that
joke.
made me laugh, which was a sequel for The Dark Knight called Too Dark Tonight, because that's just something you'd say when you don't want to go out. It's too dark tonight.
Too dark tonight. My biggest like kind of issue, I guess, and we've talked about this with Jurassic Park and Final Destination, and the Freddy vs. Jason films as well, is in my opinion, as soon as you drop any letter or words from your original title in your sequel, you can't go back to what it was before. So I hate how it's The Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, then The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. Yeah. Because the series isn't called The Fast and the Furious anymore. You know, and then it goes Fast and Furious, then there's Fast and Furious 6, but it's the first one to be called Fast and Furious number, you know?
Yeah.
It's like there's no Fast and Furious 5.
Yeah.
There's no Fast and Furious 4.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing? Yeah, and I feel like Fast 5 is the only example where I feel like something was being rectified in these titlings as well.
Yeah, like, because I would have been happy with, like, if say if 6 was the last one, if it was Fast 5 and Furious 6.
Sure. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting stuff. So it's also worth noting, as you said before, that the films have different titles in different parts of the world. And here in New Zealand, they're just Fast and Furious number of film, right?
Yeah.
And that's been the way since the fourth film. But if you can also find slightly adjusted titles for all the movies. Some of there's the Fast and the Furious 2, Fast and Furious 3, the Fast and the Furious 4, Fast and Furious 4, Fast and Furious 5, Rio Heist, which is the most interesting one of these alternate titles. Then there's Furious 6, Fast 6, the word 6, Fast 7, the word 7, Fast 8, the number 8, and then F8. And in New Zealand, we got Fast and Furious, Hobbs and Shaw, dropping the presents from the title and thus removing the clarification that it's a spin-off. But whatever, I wouldn't have it any other way. If New Zealand can do its little bit to make it more confusing about what order these films are in or what's a spin-off and what's not, then that's fine by me.
Yeah, because also in other parts of the world, it was just called Hobbs and Shaw with no Fast and Furious in the title.
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it. That's the monologue.
Well, one thing that I'm not sure if you're aware of, but I'd love to get your thoughts on. The Japanese titles for these films.
Oh, I forgot to write these down. Tell me them. Yeah.
So the Japanese titles for these films, the first one was called Wild Speed.
Hell yeah.
Which is a dope title.
Fuck yeah, dude. Fuck yeah.
So then Too Fast, Too Furious was called Wild Speed X2, which could be times 2. I'm not 100% sure, but it's Wild Speed X2.
That's better.
And then Tokyo Drift was called Wild Speed X3 Tokyo Drift. And then I'm just going to go in order because I've got all of them. So the next one was called Wild Speed Max.
These are better.
And then the next one was called Wild Speed Mega Max.
Hell yeah.
And then Wild Speed Euro Mission.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Then Wild Speed Sky Mission.
Yes.
And then Wild Speed Icebreak for Fate of the Furious.
Fuck yeah.
And then Hobbs and Shaw was called Wild Speed Super Combo.
Fuck yeah.
There's so much better, eh?
There's so much better. Even if it was Fast and Furious and then all those subtitles, that'd be better. All right, so now we're going to move on to our second to last segment of this episode. Continue the franchise. So this is where we're going to pitch our own sequels to the Fast and Furious franchise. But before we do, there are plenty of Fast and Furious sequels and properties currently in development. We have at least 2 more sequels in development in the mainline franchise, bringing us to Fast and Furious 10. Fast and Furious 9 is due out next year with Justin Lin returning to the director's chair, and we'll see all the characters except Hobbs and Shaw and Brian and Mia come back. So this includes...
Actually, Mia's back.
Oh, is she?
Yeah,
really?
Jordana,
Okay.
which is stupid. I don't want to see her again. I do not want to see her again. Like, there's no way you can bring her back without ruining the ending of Furious 7. I'm so mad about it.
I agree.
I would say I'm furious.
Charlize Theron is back,
and
I hope she's just a good guy now. Like,
she fucking will be.
You never see Charlize Theron die, and you never see fucking Brixton die. Idris Elba.
Yeah.
And Helen Mirren will be back, despite the fact that she plays Shaw's mum, and he's not in it. And John Cena has also joined the cast, which felt like an inevitability.
That John Cena's such a great addition. He's replacing Hobbs, apparently. Like, he's filling that void.
Right. 2 more spin-offs alongside Hobbs and Shaw have also been announced, with one allegedly confirmed to be a female-led film focusing on the lady characters of the series. The Fast and the Feminine, anybody?
Hey, nice.
Yeah. There's also an animated Netflix show in development called Fast and Furious Spy Races, which will focus on Tony Toretto, who's Dom's cousin, after he is recruited by a government agency and is tasked with infiltrating one of the most prestigious underground races run by a criminal organization determined to conquer the world. So this is like a kids' show.
Yeah.
Yeah. But before we get to our own sequel ideas, Richard, I would like to workshop with you who else you'd like to see join the ever-growing cast. Because have you ever played, or are you aware of the games Katamari?
Katamari Damacy? Yeah.
Damacy, yeah. Where you roll a big ball around and collect up garbage.
Yeah.
That's what this franchise is, but with A-list actors. Every movie, they just roll the ball, and there's like, Kurt Russell, Jason Statham, Idris Elba, Charlize Theron. Helen Mirren has been in 2. It's going to be in 3 films.
Yeah, and do you know how
Helen Mirren is going to be in 3 Fast and Furious?
Do you know how she got in them?
How?
She just fucking loved Furious 7 and was like, I really want to be in the next one. And then she kept on talking about it. She's like, yeah, I wouldn't have to act. I just fucking get to drive around. It sounds awesome. And even though she hasn't done any driving. But yeah, so Vin Diesel was like, hey, yeah, they'll put you in the movie.
Hey, Adrian. Yeah, okay, so here's my wish list for actors and some of them have like a reason for it. Some of them I don't know why.
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson feels like he'll join at some point.
Yeah, I can see that.
Peter Dinklage.
Okay.
Be like the third Game of Thrones actor to appear in the series.
Oh, yeah, because Natalie Emmanuel's terrible in them.
And the ginger guy from Fate of the Furious. I don't think she's terrible in them.
Oh, just her character, like the existence of her character is just so boring.
Right. Brendan Fraser should be a villain in a Fast and Furious movie.
Yeah.
Marion Cotillard.
Cotillard.
Could see her. Cotillard could be in one. Jermaine Clement. I feel like something like that'll happen at some point. You know, some hot property Kiwi actor will
Cliff
play
Curtis.
a Kiwi in it. Well, Cliff Curtis was some other.
Yeah.
I mean, like a New Zealand character. Will
Yeah.
be in it soon enough. And just to make sure that we don't lose the quintessential part of the Fast and Furious series, which is the behind the scenes feuds, let's chuck Shia LaBeouf in there because he'll piss them off.
Yeah,
He'll do something.
You saw as well. We talked about that. Dave Bautista turned down the movie because he said I'd rather be in good movies.
Good on him. Fuck yeah.
But one that I was thinking today that was quite
proceeds to star in Stuber and Central Intelligence in a row. Is that what that movie's called? Central Intelligence?
What one?
He's in a movie where he plays like a spy and he's partners up with a little girl, and it's like, this looks like you would have got confused if you're working on Stuber or not when you're filming these.
Central Intelligence is the Rock Kevin Hart movie.
It's got a real similar title. You'll look it up and you'll be like, I can see why you got that confused.
Okay, let me have a look quickly. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. Filmography. My Spy.
Is that what it's called? Okay, I thought it had a more generic title like that.
My Spy.
My Spy.
My Little Lie. So one that, you know, if we just keep introducing Shaw siblings, David Tennant is a villain.
Ah, yeah, very cool.
Because would
he be a villain at this point?
Well, no, for one film, and then he'd
of course.
But because he was considered to play Owen Shaw, I believe.
Ah, okay.
But I was like, yeah, cool.
Any other Katamari Damacy?
Who else have you got?
You wanted to roll back up?
Because like John Cena is like such an obvious, beautiful.
Who plays Glenn in The Walking Dead?
Stephen Yeun.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Fast and Furious actor.
Yeah. But like, yeah, I love them adding like prestigious actors at the not into the main family, but like in the
exactly. All right. So for a while now, you'll see online, people have been floating around the idea that we'll eventually see the Fast family venture into outer space. And while this seems perfect for Fast and Furious X, the 10th film in the series, I would like to take it further and over 11, 12, and 13 slowly start introducing aliens. I actually think Jermaine Clement could play a real good... he'd done it before in Men in Black 3.
Yeah,
Start introducing aliens, alternate dimensions, and time travel into the mix. My main goal for this is that this continued franchise is that by the 2050s, Fast and Furious will still be going and be well known for having like crossed several different genre thresholds, from its humble beginnings as street racing films to heist films to spy films to insane action movies to sci-fi and beyond, and all of them are all of that stuff, but from the perspective of people who like to drive fast cars because it's Fast and Furious.
Yeah, nice.
Yep.
Cool. Do you have any possible titles for us?
Well, Fast and Furious X was one of them.
Yeah.
I reckon they'll just eventually call one F and F.
Oh yeah,
like
nice.
F ampersand F. Like Farfu, just for short.
Because the ninth one seems to just be called Fast and Furious 9.
Right.
But and then the 10th one's because if you look at it, it says like Fast and Furious 9 untitled 10th film. It's implying that that's the title of it, I guess. But I mean, I'm sure that's what people are just like when they're talking about it on Instagram. They're like, "Yeah, we're making Fast and Furious 9," but it doesn't have an official title yet. Because I would hope that they would do a proper one. Also, interesting to note as well, just talking about continue the franchise. There's a film Justin Lin made called Better Luck Tomorrow, which is stars Sung Kang, who plays Han, and he also plays a character called Han in this film called Better Luck Tomorrow. And Justin Lin and Sung Kang both consider that a prequel to the character of Han, and that's his origin story.
What the fuck? Oh my gosh.
And he also, I mean, it is
now.
Word of God canon, so take it or leave it. But Han smokes in Better Luck Tomorrow, and in Fast 5, Giselle mentions that Han used to smoke.
Yeah, she does.
And then also, in other films, which from years ago that are potentially linked to it, that in Hobbs and Shaw, in Shaw's garage, he has a Mini Cooper which he references having used in a job in Italy, which is, of course, Jason Statham was in the Italian job. And the writer was asked about, I was reading an interview with the writer when he was asked about it, and he was like, yep, maybe.
Maybe this character with a different name in the other movie was the same
changed
character.
his name. And okay, so the Fast Furious Goes to Space is like, fuck yeah, let's do it. Did you see the thread on Reddit about it? And the top comment was like one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Because it was like, so it was like the Fast and Furious could go to space, and then the top comment was just a picture, and it was Dom Toretto behind the wheel turned 90 degrees, so he's just pointing straight up. It's so funny. Okay, so I like the idea of Fast and Furious again getting more ridiculous. So, and I think that's where everyone wants to go with it. So, one idea I had was called The Park and the Furious, which is where, for some bizarre reason, the gang has to go to Isla Nublar for their mission and outrun dinosaurs in their cars. And then that got me thinking of like, other shit. Well, so I've got a couple more crossovers as well. So obviously that's a reference to Jurassic Park, The Park and the Furious. This is my idea for Fast 9. So, and I've got two titles for this as well. So this involves time travel, where the gang goes back in time, and also because it has to do with cars as well. So they go back to Nazi Germany, with like BMWs and stuff, and on an attempt to kill Hitler. So it got two titles.
I know where this is going.
It's got two titles, either Fast 9, as an NEIN, or The Past and the Furious.
Very good.
F-U with an umlaut. H-U. The Past and the Furious. And then I thought we could do a remake of the first film. But now that the technology is better, we can give them cat ears and cover them in fur. And the Cats and the Furious, which is also owned by Universal. This is what I was looking at. What's owned by Universal?
Idris Elba?
Yeah, Idris Elba as well. Maybe he's the crossover. He's where it connects. And then Dark and Furious, or The Dark and the Furious, which is the second attempt at starting a dark universe, but using it as using the Fast and the Furious franchise as like a backdoor pilot.
It's the Wolfman, but if the Wolfman really liked driving fast cars.
So like Dom Toretto and his gang take on the Mummy and Bride of Frankenstein and the Invisible Man.
It's the way to do. It's the only way to do the dark universe.
And then they've
tried every other way.
Yeah, it would be like Dark and Furious versus the Wolfman, and then in the next film they end up recruiting the Wolfman to take on Bride of Frankenstein.
Benicio del Toro could return as the Wolfman.
Benicio del Toro is a good Fast and Furious actor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Yes, that's mine.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of the show, Richard. But before we sign off, we've got to select our franchise for the next fortnight. So, Richard, give us a random number, and that random number is going to correlate to a list we have of all the franchises we could think of. The last number we've got on this list is 185.
Alrighty. Sorry, I had the sound off. Let me...
95.
Franchise number 95. Before I tell you what it is, Richard, I've got to tell you about this little Facebook page called Cult Popture, which is us and our YouTube channel and our Acast account and on Apple Podcasts and yada, yada, yada. Twitter, Instagram. Find us on Cult Popture everywhere. You can email us at cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. And we are going to be doing... I can see you writing something. What number was it?
What number do you want it to be?
Well, it was 95, right?
Yeah.
All right, so next fortnight, we're going to be doing RoboCop. Oh, this feels like we're going to be dipping a toe in a very passionate audience we don't know anything about. So there are 3 RoboCop movies and a reboot. I believe there is one also in production as well.
Yeah, potentially.
So that'll be us for the next franchise. Will be the RoboCop series. That's exciting. Are you excited?
No.
Oh, good. Well, you know what? It'll be okay, Richard, because we're family.
Yeah. And this
We're
is
family.
our one last ride anyway. I get pulled out of retirement to do one last job, which is to watch and discuss RoboCop and its sequels.
I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for listening to this whopping over 2 hour podcast. We love you and we love fast cars.